That was the sorriest excuse for a playoff game I have ever seen. We'll sadly get more into that and much more on the Oilers Kings series on today's episode of Locked On Oilers.
You're Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome back to the Locked On Oilers podcast. I'm your host and former Game Day Oilers producer, Brett Holden, as Game 5 for the Oilers did not go as planned in the slightest. In the slightest. It was one of, if not the worst playoff games I have ever seen as an Edmonton Oiler fan or Edmonton Oiler host or as somebody who covers the Edmonton Oilers. That was the worst thing I have ever seen out of the Edmonton Oilers. And I watched the Decade of Darkness, and it was awful. We'll get more into just what absolutely stunk for the Oilers in Game 5. And honestly, I'm going to talk a lot about the refs in the third section of today's episode, or in the third period of today's episode. I know it'll come off a little bit like a salty Oilers fan, and I completely understand, but I would be making the same, and I will make a point against the Edmonton Oilers in this episode as well when it comes to the refs. So that'll be coming up in the third period of today's episode. In the second period of today's episode, there are so many freaking line changes for the Edmonton Oilers. It reminds me of Dave Tippett and Todd McClellan's Oilers, and I hate it. We will get more into that in the second period of today's episode. Thank you so much for making Locked On Oilers your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you find your podcast, including YouTube. Hello, YouTube. Hi. You can see how sad I am today, as I have defeat behind my eyes. I am wearing a freaking soccer jersey, for goodness sakes, because I'm getting ready for the summer, as it seems like the Oilers might be, as the Oilers are on the brink of elimination in the first round once again. I said in our NHL Locked On NHL and our Locked On Now, I said deja vu, and it feels like the Oilers are just right back to where they were last season and the season before. Game 5 sucked, man. I'm going to be honest with you. For 40 minutes, I sat there questioning whether or not the Edmonton Oilers were an NHL hockey team. Sorry. That was, as Leon Draisaitl said, the first 10 minutes of the game is super important for the Oilers, and it starts with Leon Draisaitl's line, and it just did not happen at all for the Oilers, and it hasn't happened for the Oilers at any point in the first 5 games of this series. At all. At any point. Out of the 5 games that have been played in this series, the first goal of the game has been scored in the first 10 minutes in 3 of them. The team who scores first has gone on to win each and every game in this series. One of the games, the Kings scored 11 minutes into the game. So let's just cut the middleman. Let's just say there's been a goal in the first 11 minutes of every game but one in this series. 3 of them were by the LA Kings. One of them in the first period were scored by the Oilers. 1. The Oilers have scored 1 first period goal in this series. At least, I should say in the first 10 minutes. Is that something that you think, sitting there as an Oilers fan, is an acceptable thing to do in the playoffs? Playoffs? That's what it feels right now. It honestly feels like a joke when we sit here and say that that was a playoff game. That felt like game 33 of 82 as the Oilers are missing a couple bodies and a couple guys are just coming back from the summer's IR. That wasn't a playoff game. And if it was, that is the saddest excuse for at least the first two periods of a playoff game I could ever possibly imagine. The Oilers had one shot through 11 minutes and 10 seconds of the first period. One shot. The LA Kings were already up 1-0 at that point. Where, what are we doing? After game one, the Edmonton Oilers sat there and pleaded, saying that, well, not pleaded, but they sat there saying, you know what? The fans got us too jittery. We were making too many mistakes. We were up and making too many moves at the start of game one. Okay. I would prefer that than one shot on goal in 11 minutes and 10 seconds. Their second shot on goal didn't come until the 8-minute and 53-second mark of the first period. 5 shots on goal after 20. What does this start? You come out here and you praise the fans. You say they're the best fans in the world, and you have given them nothing to cheer about. Nothing. They sit there and try, and they try, and they try to cheer you on, and then you shoot yourself in the foot. You take a stupid penalty. You allow the early goal. You don't get shots on goal. You aren't throwing any hits. Why are you even there? Why did you drive to the arena last night? If you weren't just going to show up, if you did not plan on showing up until the third period, why did you drive to Rogers Place last night? Why? The Edmonton Oilers did not look like they were ready to play an NHL hockey playoff game. And they got the result they deserved. They got the result they deserved. Everybody wrote off the LA Kings coming into this series. Hell, we talked to Sarah from Locked On Kings, and even she said Oilers in 6. Well, if it's going to be the Oilers, it's going to have to be the Oilers in 7 and at home and have to come back from a 3-2 series deficit because they have decided to not show up in the first period of any games. And let's pray that they show up in the second period, but that's not even why we're here. That is not why we're here. I don't even want to get into the second periods because it is so up and down. The first period is where the Oilers and where the game is decided in this series. It is. It's simple as that. The first period is where the game is decided. And if the LA Kings are the team that win the first period, then the LA Kings are the team that are going to go on to win the game. And if the Oilers allow the Kings to go on to win the first period in game 6, then they're cooked. They're going golfing. They might as well put on the soccer jersey I have on because they won't have to worry about any ice-related sports. It's sick. It's sick. And the Oilers started off with a few new lines, so I understand that it might take a little bit to try and understand where your teammate is going to be at the start of the game. I completely understand that, but it's the playoffs. You've been playing with these guys for how long? We'll get a little bit more into the line changes, that were made by Jay Woodcroft before the game started, before game 5 started, and there were plenty. There were plenty. But before we get into that, this episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it is now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning like, is your Odyssey an LX or an EX? And wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry when you have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. Why choose to spend 30, 50, and even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or a car dealership when that same Honda Odyssey that we were trying to decide if it's an LX or an EX, the gas pump on that LX or an EX at your local chain store can be up to $353. On Rock Auto, it is $216. A little bit of a difference. Save time and money while using Rock Auto. Plus, Rock Auto is a family business. They have been serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years now. They have everything you could possibly need at rockauto.com, from brake parts to tail lamps to even your carpet. They have all of those things at rockauto.com. Go and explore their easy to use website today. Find the solution to your auto part needs. And while you are there at rockauto.com, you can go and make sure that you put down where they sent you. It was us, Locked On Oilers. Locked On Oilers sent you to Rock Auto, and make sure you put it in there where they say, "How did you hear about us?" Well, Brett from Locked On told you. So, amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. rockauto.com. I bet they don't change the lines as much as the Oilers did in Game 5. For the third episode in a row, I have to take my glasses off before the second period of this episode. Because I am heated. News came out on before Game 4 started before Game 5 started, that the Oilers were going to rock a couple of new lines, new changes to basically every line for the Oilers. As we talked about in yesterday's episode, I am a huge fan of Jesse Puljujärvi and what Jesse Puljujärvi does. And once that episode came out, about 20 minutes later, Jesse Puljujärvi was in the bottom six. So that aged well. Anyways, on going into last night's game, the lines were for the Edmonton Oilers: Evander Kane with Connor McDavid and Kyler Yamamoto. Ryan McLeod, an interesting name, ended up coming up into the top six with Leon Draisaitl and Zach Hyman. Also onto the third line was Josh Archibald, which was an interesting name to join Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and Jesse Puljujärvi on that third line. And then on the fourth line, Warren Foegele, Derek Ryan, and Zach Kassian. Not bad lines. I'm not going to lie. We went into the game last night and we were going to say, okay, got a couple new lines. We're going to see how they deploy, let's see how they work together. Obviously, as all the press conferences and everybody said in their interviews leading up to the game, they were fine with it. It's hockey. That's what's supposed to happen. If something's not working, you better change it or your season's going to be done. That's fair. Go and change stuff up. And when you take a look at it, Evander Kane, Kyler Yamamoto being the wingers for Connor McDavid is perfect. We talk a lot about just how much Kyler Yamamoto goes into the corners, fights for the puck, fights for that extra inch every single shift. And when he came out in the second period after seemingly being stapled to the bench for some reason, he caused the issue. He came out and made plays. But unfortunately for the Oilers, by the time the second period came around, the lines were all over the place. This was the exact same issue that we had with, Dave Tippett, the exact same issue we had with Todd McClellan. Nobody could find chemistry. Why are we changing the lines so much every single time either 97 or 29 comes out for a cycle? It seems like there's new lines. They have new line mates with them every single time. What are we doing? Is this beer league? Is this the closest guy to the bench or closest guy to the door? Just get out there? Golden State, I am beyond flabbergasted at how we constantly think as an organization that every single time something goes wrong in an important game, we just start throwing the lines in a blender and hoping it sticks to the wall. For the end of the game, the lines were Kyler Yamamoto, Connor McDavid, and Leon Draisaitl on the first line, Evander Kane, Ryan McLeod, and Zach Hyman on the second line, Archibald, Nugent Hopkins, and Puljujarvi on the third line, and then Fogel, Ryan, and Cassian on the fourth line there. And we even saw some flipping of lines at some points with with Puljujarvi and Cassian. Cassian was getting some time on the third line, and we talked about what happens when Cassian's on the ice. Cassian got a goal. Cassian tied the game. Then he comes out in the next shift, bangs bodies, the crowd's into the game, and all of a sudden, the Oilers have momentum. Isn't that weird? Isn't that just a mind-exploding moment? And guess who he came out with? Kyler Yamamoto, who at the time had only played 1 minute and 39 seconds in the second period. And he came out and caused more energy. But then we go back and we just start looking at the lines and guessing. We just start guessing. We just start throwing them out there again. Now, we talked about how much Philip Deneau has been an issue for Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid in games that the LA Kings have won. Well, now we just say, hey, look, Philip, here's both of them. They're both on the ice. Lock down both of them. And look what happens. Philip Deneau scores a fourth goal of the game on the power play, just as reminiscent as his goal in game one. And and shockingly, it was the fourth goal of the game, just like it was in game one. Take a look at that. On the power play, off a shot from the point. The exact same play. I can't tell if I'm explaining the first goal of the game or the fourth goal of the game from game one or the fourth goal of the game from game 5. It was the exact same. Have we learned? Have we learned? I'm lost. I am lost. So then why do we think that we're going to go back to the same methodology that coaches like Dave Tippett, who eventually got run out of town because of not getting anything out of his players? I wonder why, when they're playing on different lines every single time they get onto the ice. Guys like Todd McClellan, who was doing the exact same thing. And now we're in a game potentially now with our backs against the walls in an elimination game on Thursday night, and we don't know what we're even going to do. I couldn't even conjure up a lineup for you, a potential lineup for you in game 6. I couldn't. At one point, we had Kyler Yamamoto, Ryan McLeod, and Zach Cassian playing together. And I'll be honest, I am all the way here for it. I like it. But you know how long we will get that line? Maybe 2 shifts. Maybe. And if the Oilers are losing, we won't even get it. Actually, we might get it for 1 shift because the Oilers are just trying to throw stuff against the wall and see what sticks. This is not how you play in a game that you need to win. You don't sit there and just go, I have no confidence in what we are deploying right now. We got to change it up. You got to sit there and put confidence in your players by playing them. If they're making costly mistakes that end up in the back of your net, sure, I understand. I completely understand. But when you take a look at last night's game, those issues, those mistakes that are being put into the back of the Oilers' net weren't from the Oilers' forwards. It was from the defense. So why are we messing with the forwards? We need energy. We need hits. We need shots. We need to see those from the Oilers. And that is not what's happening. And you're not going to get that by changing the lines every dang time they are on the ice because they're just not going to know where to be. Get the players with players that they actually know how to play with, and you'll get success. I swear to you, I promise to you. I promise to you. That is exactly what's going to happen. I promise. Please, please, please stop messing with the lines. Jay Woodcroft, I am looking at the camera. I am looking you in the eyes, hopefully with no glasses on because they're just going to fog up anyways. Please, just stick with the lines you started off the game with. Please. If there's an issue at some point in the game, I understand people get hurt. I understand people make mistakes. That's when you start worrying about it, not when the entire team can't figure out how to play. Because now you're just going to cause an absolute confusion in the system. And that is where I am going to end my rant on the lines for the Oilers. This has been a rant that I've had for the Oilers for years. So this is a well-rehearsed rant for me, may I say. Now, another much more well-rehearsed rant that I've rehearsed quite often is the NHL refs. I mentioned before we got into the episode that I'm going to complain about the refs. And I understand that this is coming off the back of a loss for the Edmonton Oilers. In fact, 2 back-to-back losses for the Edmonton Oilers. I understand that this may not be the best timing. But this is the NHL playoffs. And the officiating needs to be better. I'll get more into that in just a second. But first, summer's right around the corner, everybody. Summer is right around the corner. I know it was snowing in Edmonton yesterday. It is much better today, but summer is coming. And with summer, you're going to need some food on the go. And Built Bars are the perfect snack to take with you on your summer vacations. Put them in your bags, put them in your kids' backpacks. Make sure everybody has a bar so they are fueled and ready to go for your summer adventures. The best part about Built Bars is that they are healthy and delicious. No more sacrificing delicious food for health. With Built Bar, you can have both. You can. It is easy. All you have to do is go to built.com and order now. I have talked so much about their puffs. I am sure you're getting sick of me talking about the puffs, but I am crazy about the puffs. And they are constantly coming out with crazy flavors all the time, including banana cream pie and even churro. Oh, who doesn't want a protein bar that tastes like a churro? If that is not all the flavor that you can handle, there's even more flavor that you can get. If that's not enough, then you can order their mixed box as well. The mixed box comes with 12 flavors of bars and of the puffs as well. Most Built Bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. When you compare that to your normal conventional candy bar that normally has about 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs, it is high and away much better for you. Go to built.com to get all of your favorites, including that banana cream pie, including that churro. They also have raspberry, double chocolate, and so many more. They are all delicious, and new flavors are coming out all the time. All you need to do is go to built.com, and while you're at built.com and while you are checking out, make sure you use the promo code LOCKED15. Yes, that is locked 15 to get 15% off your order. That is 15% off while using the promo code LOCKED15 at built.com. This has been an emotionally filled Wednesday episode, everybody. Let's just take a breath together before we get into this last section. Okay. I'm about to get emotional again. I'm sorry. That moment of zen lasted about 15 seconds. Because the officiating that has been going on throughout the entire NHL playoffs has been abysmal. I don't even know if that is exactly the proper words for it. This has been one of the biggest jokes of officiating I have ever seen out of the NHL. And me and my father, as well, since 2005, have been saying that the NHL refs have a major problem. And we are now seeing why it is such a major problem. This is the playoffs. This is the playoffs, and the game is being officiated like it's game 6 of 82. We talked about how the Oilers are playing like it's game 33. The refs are officiating like it's game 6. Not even of the playoffs, of a full 82 game season plus playoffs out of preseason. The first goal, as I mentioned, has been scored in the first 10 minutes of each game, or of 3 of the 5 games so far. And I believe it's been about 2 of them have been on the power play for a team. In game 1, Kyler Yamamoto got a penalty 50 seconds into the game for roughing. In game 1 of the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs, 50 seconds. You're going to set a precedent that early. If you're going to call a game, if you're going to call that penalty 50 seconds into the game, you are saying that I am going to call every single one of these. And it didn't happen. If you're going to set the bar for consistency right there, you better stick with it. I understand that setting a bar of consistency for game to game, from game to game, from period to period is difficult. But you have to. Every game is going to be different. Every game is going to be different. So you have to sit there and react to the game that you are officiating. You cannot sit there and pretend that the history that has happened has to come into this game before this game. It cannot come into the effects of the calls that you are making. It can't. It cannot. Every single scrum that the Oilers and the Kings had in game 5, the Oilers ended up with the extra penalty. It didn't make sense. It did not make sense. The LA Kings were just as at fault for all of these scrums as the Oilers were, and every single time the Oilers got somebody pulled away. In game 5, in game 3, in game 4 even, or in game 2 even, excuse me. The LA Kings were getting the extra penalty. And guess what happened? In games 2 and in games 3, the Oilers ran away with it with a huge thanks to the special teams play. In game 5, when we take a look at the penalties that were called, especially in the third period, the call on Connor McDavid is not a tripping penalty, especially not with 10 minutes to go in game 5 of the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. If it's game 6 of the 82 game regular season, sure, maybe. But not in game 5 of the Stanley Cup playoffs. It cannot be called. And then the Oilers go on to get a double minor from killing that penalty from a high stick from Ryan McLeod that went up on a potential breakaway that killed all the momentum. I am not going to argue that that wasn't a penalty, because that was absolutely textbook high stick. In fact, it was a textbook 4-minute high stick. And that is exactly what should have been called. But that play shouldn't have happened, because the Oilers, Connor McDavid, had an awful tripping call called on him just a couple minutes before. And Philip Deneau ended up scoring to put the Kings up by 2. That had an impact on the game. And so what did the refs go and do later on in the game with 5 minutes left? They end up calling Philip Deneau on an awful call. Awful. And what happens on that power play? The Oilers tie it up and get all the momentum in the world to take the game into overtime. The Kings, let the game slip away because of an awful call from the referee. You cannot have that much of a thumb in the game. You can't have that much of an impact of the game. You can't, especially in the playoffs. Especially in the playoffs. I understand that the Oilers ended up benefiting from just this weird inconsistency that we have seen from the playoff officials all series long, throughout all of the series. But genuinely, that is awful. Keep your hands off of the game. You take a look in the stands and you see how many ref jerseys are in there. There's not a lot. Because I promise you, nobody came to see the refs in Game 5 of the Stanley Cup playoffs. So why is there so much screen time for the officials? I saw more close-ups of the officials making penalty calls in Game 5 than I saw of Connor McDavid celebrating his beautiful goal. Why? What are we here for? They're not the star of the show. And I understand they're there to mediate the games, but this is playoffs. There needs to be a bite. Ask Daryl Sutter. Daryl Sutter said in his post-game interview after Game 1 when his star player is getting into fights, Eric Francis goes, "Oh, are you okay with Kachuk fighting?" He goes, "Yeah, no kidding, Eric. It's the playoffs. I want them to get gritty." What are we doing here? In Game 4, we saw, let me see, pull this up here, 84 penalty minutes between the two teams. 84 in 60 minutes. In Game 4, we saw 6 misconducts, 3 to each team. Is this beer league hockey or is this playoff hockey? This needs to change. This needs to change if you want to grow the game. Not every game needs 30 minutes of playoff time or power play time, for each team. I'm sorry. It just does not. It does not. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to pull it off on that note because genuinely Game 5 was tough. I'm sorry, Oilers fans. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry that everything of this episode has just been a complaint, one long complaint. So let's end it off on a happy note. Shall we? Shall we? The Edmonton Oilers haven't lost 3 straight games since Jay Woodcroft took over on February 10th. So the Oilers have lost 2 in a row, and that was actually the 3rd time under Jay Woodcroft's tenure that the Oilers have lost consecutive games. I may have jinxed it when I messed up in the second period of yesterday's episode, but now the Oilers have lost 3 times consecutively under Jay Woodcroft, but never 3 games in a row. Never. So watch out for that. Oilers play tomorrow night. Hopefully it's not their last game of the season. They play tomorrow night, Thursday night in Los Angeles, 8 o'clock puck drop. I hope you're having a wonderful Wednesday. Thank you so much for making Locked On Oilers your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On NHL, from the first round matchups to each and every single Stanley Cup kiss. Locked On NHL covers the playoffs like no other. Hear the latest news and opinions from local experts every Monday through Friday. It is free and available wherever you get your podcast, and it's even on YouTube. Hello, YouTube. I'm also here. Make sure if you're listening audibly that you do go to the YouTube and subscribe as well. Thank you so much, Oil Country. Let's decompress. Let's have a quick Wednesday and get into Thursday, which is a game day. I shall see you then. Stay safe, everybody. Don't do anything I wouldn't do.